Hey, welcome everyone. Hi, Shanky.
Hey, Paul. How are you doing?
Yeah, pretty good. We just had a really, really good chat there with Josh. He's obviously widely known as at Carpe Noctem on Twitter, and yeah, it's just one of those analysts that really has a lot of insight to share.
Yeah, absolutely. Very sharp guy, good insights, good experience. So yeah, it was fun chatting with him.
Totally. And yeah, definitely, obviously, wouldn't have been a conversation without about crypto without kind of Elon Musk coming in and a few of the other topical pieces, which yeah, he had some really interesting perspectives on. And yeah, as we got through, he also shared some of the technical analysis he does with the Ichimoku cloud. So that's a new indicator to me, and maybe one we can look at in an episode as well. We'll have Josh on to explain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we should. Yeah, absolutely. Good idea.
Great. So yeah, what are we going to be looking at on today's Charted?
I think today let's look at the majors, with the whole Elon saga unfolding. That's probably what we should look at and see where we stand, right?
Yeah.
Look at BTC, the price action there. Look at ETH, which has seen some rapid price rise over the last couple of weeks, especially last week, and see where, what's happening with it. And then I think if time permits, once we have gone through BTC and ETH, we take a quick look at some of the serious alternatives like BNB, or maybe even some of the upcoming ones like Roon or Solana or others, just very quickly. So let's do that. Yeah, let's maybe pick up these two for today.
Perfect. All right, let's jump into the majors.
Okay, so we start with Bitcoin. Something to mention and remind, we have been, I don't know if I could use the word pleasantly, but certainly been surprised that our analysis has been spot on. Not once, not twice, but now 3 times over the last 4 weeks. And let's see what the chart tells us now. Right. Again, remember, this is not investment advice, and we have absolutely zero information beyond these charts, right? Just like everybody else. We didn't know Elon Musk was going to unfold this whole story, but we did think that the price would retest the 44,125 mark, as we had tweeted a few days back, and it's true today. We did touch that.
Yeah, and what was the indicator? Perhaps remind the audience what we were using when kind of plotting those.
Yeah, absolutely. So in fact, you're right. Just kind of stepping back, we've been studying BTC price for a bit, and what we have seen is that after the rapid rise from December to mid-February, right? So I'm just moving the chart there just so that we are on the same page, same perspective. So if you look at this, BTC was hovering in that, between 10 and 15 zone for the most part of late last year. Late November, December, just started rising, and then it went parabolic for most of December and January and February. And it almost looked like it was going to go breach 60,000 and continue on its journey upwards. And if you start looking at the stock to flow and other models, the prediction was that we are going to be at 80,000 and more. There was also this whole dream of 100,000, the 100K, and the laser eyes memes that were floating around, right? So a lot of that was going on, and it was looking like it's going to be unstoppable, that that story would probably unfold before we would even reach June, right? So that is how it was appearing back in the beginning of the year. Thereby, the first half of the year, we might be close enough to those realities. What did happen though is that somewhere when it reached that 55,000 mark, it started seeing that resistance, a big resistance and a big pressure, sell pressure. I think initially it was just the fact that any asset that rises very rapidly finally kind of let steam. So it did seem like initially it was more of just profit taking and logical pullbacks that happens in any upward journey, and that had been observed in the past as well. So even if you see during this parabolic rise in January, we did see a few pullbacks, right? These reds that we saw in January, but the story continued, and we did get to as far up as 58,000. In fact, 58,561. I think that is what this number says. And then this one seemed like just another logical pullback, right? So at this point in time, when we were studying the markets, we weren't surprised at all. And it just seemed like, yeah, this is just a logical pullback. It's testing EMA 20. And, EMA 20 usually is an indicator of a strong trend. And then, it's going to keep continuing on its journey upwards, right? So that was the assessment. But what we did observe after that was that it just struggled around that, roughly call it the 60K resistance zone, right? So the resistance area 60K was becoming incredibly hard for BTC to break, and not only once, but it tested twice and thrice and 4 times and 5 times, and on and on, right? So it lingered in that zone through March and the first part of April. And so by the end of March, I think what we were trying to study then was really what's going on in terms of volumes, what's going on in terms of the price action. And then we were also just looking at the 60K very keenly. What we did see at that point in time was there were periods when the volatility dropped substantially. In fact, that's very evident from this chart, because early on you see both, very big green candles and then subsequent very large red candles. So there was a lot of volatility, a lot of price action on a daily level. And that had subsided down to this zone where it had become very quiet, right? Like, just look at these candles, right? Like, these candles substantially smaller than these or these, right? So the mood had changed, right? It had really gone into that area of, you could call it either distribution or accumulation. A lot of the prediction was that this is really an accumulation phase, and then, boom, again, it's going to break upwards, and, the journey would be louder and bigger than ever before, right? So that was the kind of prediction, and that was the kind of sentiment for a lot of people. I think we weren't 100% sure. We thought that's a possibility, because any quiet phase is usually followed by a loud phase, if you may, or a wide price movement. So it could be either way, right? Up or down. And our assessment was, let's watch it, right? And when it broke 60K a little bit here, it did feel like, yeah, okay, looks like the upward journey is, restored, right? Like, that's at least the initial feeling. But when we saw this red, which was on 14th of April back then, that put a little doubt in our mind, right? That's when we thought, hey, if you just purely look at the candles and purely look at the price action and forget every other thesis or sentiment, right, that is external to this chart, the chart is not telling you, what this is really looking out like is like a fake out, not a breakout, right? So it went till about this point, but just couldn't hold it. And immediately after this big green candle, we started seeing reds one after the other. So this is where our prediction was that I think that this doesn't look good. This certainly looks like the resistance is more serious than it was originally conceived. And it is likely to go and test the next support level. So the support level, if you just look at price action over the last 3-4 months, rather 3 months, right? So Feb, March, April, 3 months, was roughly around these 2 different price points. So one was, of course, the 47,532, which I drew in one of the chartered sessions. This was really done live in a chartered session where we just looked at some of these candles and, drew out a line. And then we drew out the second line, which seemed like these 2 were definitely, support levels that one needs to keep, one's eye on and watch for. And then we saw this getting tested. So this is where we had predicted, we had said, I think the support level will get tested. And these barrage of reds really tested it, not once, but twice. And that confirmed our prediction, right? And then it went back up. But when it went back up, again, it was a couple of big greens, but again, it sort of lurked around here in that 55 zone, and the strength failed, right? Again, it started losing steam, right? Just the moment it was getting closer to 60K, it was just getting nervous, if you may, from a price action standpoint, right? And so I think our prediction again was, well, looks like it's going to go back to that support, and it did, right? It went back to this support and it touched here. And when it touched this support, right, through this big red, and just general price action that was happening in the BTC world, we also predicted, we had suspected back up here, right, back when it was still up here, that it might actually, this time when it goes back, it might not only test this support, the 47,000 support, but it might also go down to the next support, which is 44,000 support. And when it, after this big red candle and then again period of indifference, this kind of dojo type of a day, it certainly looked like the second support level is 100% coming. And in fact, that's when we tweeted back on May 13th saying, well, looks like the second one is coming, right? Seems very likely.
Yeah.
And it came today.
And we've seen that only a few hours before the show. So I guess a lot of people are anxious and kind of going, is there really support there? And obviously, yeah, short of another tweet from Elon, kind of, is there enough demand that it could find the support and go back up? Are we seeing any indicators of that?
Yeah, so let's study that now. What I am going to do is I'm going to remove the 20 MA because we are far from the 20 MA. It's become an irrelevant MA right now to track. Although I must mention that it's, at least if you just looked at 20 and 50, the two have crossed, right? More recently, just
Sure.
like a more bearish cross. But it's not telling us too much there. So let's go with the more longer term trend. To remind everybody, usually these moving averages work as great trend filters, right? And the way they usually work is there are of course multiple periods that one could use. There is no right or wrong answer, but usually 20, 50, and 200 are the ones that we like. I personally feel that there's a logical connection to it, right? The 20 is the shortest one. 20 is roughly the number of trading days in a month, at least in traditional markets. And so therefore it has served for years as an indicator of short-term trend, right? And if the prices are above 20 MA, it's basically saying one way or the other, right? Like if it's very sharply above, that it's very bullish. If it's sharply below, that's very bearish. So the 20 is like more of a, hey, what's my immediate story? What's going on right now type of a story, right? The 50 is sort of the middle trend, if you may. And so if it's above 50, for example, it shows that there is a, a healthy-ish trend. It's not very parabolic, it's not very strong, but it's sort of, healthy trend. But definitely weaker than the strong trend, right? But it's 200 is in some sense the point where you would even figure out if there is a trend, right? So if it's above 200, that the it's bullish, at least long-term bullish. Let's think of it that way, right? And again, 200 maps to roughly the number of trading days in a year. So when you look at 200, you feel like, yeah, okay, this is long-term bullish. And if it's below 200, then it's long-term bearish, right? Or at least that's what the long-term trend is looking like. My guess would be that the next support is really EMA 200. And so EMA 200 for Bitcoin is going to be roughly around that 42,000 level. Let me draw one line out here. And my hunch is, not 100% sure, but I think later today we'll see from price action for sure. We'll get a sense. Somewhere here, I would say roughly. Yeah, so this is where we're going to see the price come down to, the 200 MA, right? And this is an EMA, by the way, but even if you use a DMA or any other MAs, it should be roughly somewhere in that zone, right? Again, the idea is not to get exact signs, but at least get to a point of, what does this tool tell us? And then my sense is that if this gets tested, if EMA 200 gets tested around the 42,000 mark, right? Right now it's that 44,000 mark roughly, right? So this is the 44,161 or something. In fact, the price is a little below that, right? And then here, this is the 42,000 mark. Now, if this gets breached, if we really lose the trend, if we lose the long-term trend, then I would not be surprised at all if the price then tests the next support level. And I'm trying to figure out what the next support level is. It's a very fuzzy bit because, we saw some weird price action here back in January, February timeframe, right? Like this zone, right? So it'll try and find a support from here. I can see 2-3 possible points here. Let's just plot them. So one, of course, is rock bottom, this one, right? This is all the way down, I would say here. And the way I'm, by the way, getting this is just trying to see how many wicks does it touch, right? Like how many price points does it validate, right? So 30,151, yeah, right, for the rock bottom.
And also we were talking on the earlier recording with Josh as well around if people had bought Bitcoin before Elon had started, tweeting about Tesla buying it and all of that, potential hype that pushed it up towards 60, then that's around the point they might have bought in at, right?
Correct. Exactly. Yeah. So this is maybe a next one. This is a difficult one because there are a lot of like up and down price movements, a little not so clean, let's put it that way. But I would say there is sort of a support here, right? Because this was previous resistance for a few candles, and then it was sort of support here, right, for these. And this is where the Elon story really happened, somewhere around here. So my sense is, in short, we are likely to see EMA 200 being tested, which means definitely I think I could move this to this point now. It's probably coming to this point. I wouldn't be surprised at all. This is, what point is this? 42,479. So just about 42,500. That's definitely coming. Whether it bounces back from here or goes further, we don't know yet, right? We will get to know how it reaches this point. If the bearish momentum continues, I think it will go down further because at this point in time, the long-term trend is getting questioned. Bounces back, we'll have to see, right? That's an unknown territory. We'll have to see what happens there if it bounces back from this point. But if it breaches this point and breaks at EMA 200, that's the end of the long-term trend, which started almost last year, right? So if you look here, this one, go back, EMA 200, we are looking all the way back here, right? So all the way back here in that zone of 2020, right? So almost a year back, right? After that March dip, right? So the coronavirus dip, the COVID-19 dip of March 2020, and then, slow sort of rise up, and then the parabolic rise up, that will basically get invalidated to an extent, that big long-term trend. Doesn't mean that's the end of the bull run, by the way. Okay, so let's not try to read too much into it. But it definitely means that there will be a new price discovery. Like you cannot rely on the current price discovery. There's going to be completely a new trend formation, if you may, right? And then we have to start thinking afresh a little bit in terms of what are the forces, right? What are the buying pressures and what are the selling pressures and what does the future look like? But anyway, if this gets tested and it breaks down, I can see these as possible levels, right? So obviously the next one that it is going to test is around the 38,000 mark. Like I said, this is not a very clean area of support, but I can see it because this is also around the time when that whole Elon saga happened, roughly above the 35,000 mark. And then if it cannot hold this either, if the bearish momentum continues and perhaps like we were, hypothesizing, if you may, that, people may have entered the market with the Elon hype and now that Elon's leaving the field, they're going to leave with him, right? Like if that's going to happen, then I think you might see further selling pressure, right? And if further selling pressure builds up, then the next point where it will hold will be closer to 30,000. The 30,151 definitely is a very clean area of support that has been tested a few times. So, this 30,000 plus is definitely a clean area of support. And honestly, I think if it breaks below 30,000, like if the bearish momentum really is very aggressive for some reason, where you are now looking at like 3 different points being broken, right? So it's not going to be one single break, but a little up and back and forth. But you're talking about breaking EMA 200, breaking the 38,000, then also breaking 30,000. I think then we are really thinking about maybe the market's turning, right? But it's a little distance away, and many things have to happen for it to even reach that far. So long story short, I think I'll keep my eyes on the EMA 200 first, right? Look at the 42,000, watch it very carefully. My sense is that it is going to get tested over the next few days, certainly over this week, the coming week, right? The week that's unfolding. It's quite possible. And then I think the key price action there to watch out for is, does it bounce off that point or does it break, right? If it bounces, well, we got to figure out where BTC price is headed. If it breaks, certainly it's a break of trend, as we just discussed. And then I think keep an eye out for the 38,000, right? So, and then go one step from there.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess BTC is still dominant, had lost some of its dominance comparatively to Ethereum, but they're both pretty much in tandem at the moment, aren't they?
They are, which is an interesting one. That's actually a great question, because let's first look at the relative bias. So this is the chart of Ethereum to BTC, right? So we saw early on in the bull run, BTC was on top as compared to ETH price action. All the action was on BTC price. Then the the sort of tables turned, and ETH went extra bullish as compared to BTC. In fact, if you look at this from April 1st, right, that's interesting. Somewhere around April 1st, when they were almost together, the sort of EMA 20 and EMA 50, and there was still a little bit of silence here, if you may, or a period of accumulation, right? Like all this period from most of March, the candles were super small. There was no relative movement. It just took off. There was a parabolic rise, and after that, ETH has gone through multiple phases of growth, and then some humongous green candles, and the last few days have been unbelievable, right? Like if you start looking at it from a price point, that was around May 8th or so, I think. Yeah, the May 4th, May 8th, it's just been up, up, and up. In fact, sort of like the classic up-only paradigm of of the crypto ethos.
Yeah.
Right? So if you look at the ETH price, if you bring back to ETH price and say, look at this, we've had these Fibonacci which keeps getting redrawn because ETH keeps going up. So if you put it there, I think I could make it slightly more. Okay, so let's look at this. So I think we saw the dates were around May 8th or something, May 4th. Yeah, May 4th, right? So May 4th. So this is very clear, right? So it started around here.
Yep.
30th April, so May 1st, 2nd, and then it's like bunch of green candles, right? With some small pullbacks, and the pullbacks are not surprising at all. I mean, whenever there's a humongous green candle, there'll be a little bit of profit taking or a little bit of pullback. That's just normal. But overall, if you look at this, there's been massive, very big, very big sort of surge, humongous, strong parabolic rise. It's also very evident from the gap that it has created with respect to EMA 20, right? Even after this bearish correction a little bit, there is still a very big gap as compared to EMA 20 as it stands. So yeah, that's where ETH is. My sense with ETH, yeah, sorry, you were saying something, Paul. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I'm just looking at that and saying, okay, we're at that Fibonacci kind of first retracement level there,
right.
And if the trend is reversing, could we see the second Fibonacci level in the coming weeks, kind of around about 3,000?
It could be. It's possible, right? So this around 3,000 level is just above the 0.382. And you're right, it did test at 0.236, and it's sort of still hovering around there, right, in today's price. In fact, it has breached that a little bit. I would think it's possible. It's very possible. Now, the reason why I say that is because, one, the markets themselves look a little bit in turmoil, right, thanks to all the chaos in the BTC market. And usually when that turmoil happens, I think there is sort of repercussions or cascading effects across different assets, right? So I can certainly see that cascading effect on ETH. Let's also keep in mind, though, that there is that 1559 actually going to go live in June, isn't it? June is the time, right, Paul? I think June is when it's going live.
End of June, start of July, yeah.
Right, there you go. So June, July, right? So my sense is, I'm just trying to again read a little bit in the charts, and then some things which is not on the charts, which is kind of adding to this story. I think yes, you might see some more price drop on the ETH front. And it's very possible that 3,000 would get tested again, because 3,000 is again a psychological number. One, let me draw a line here. So 3,000 here, and it's also close enough to the 0.382 number. I think as the price continues to evolve, it'll also line up a little bit with the EMA 20. So retesting of EMA 20 is not unusual for many assets, and we have seen that with ETH as well, right? ETH retested EMA 20 back in December. It retested it a few times in February, retested it again in March. It had come close enough in April, even when during its first leg of the the rise, and then it has had a very wide gap. So given that just this reality, I would not be surprised at all that the price corrects a little bit, comes near the 3000-ish type of time frame, right? Like this 3000 level, and so then it both retests EMA 20 and also sort of gets close enough to the 0.382 fib, and the market being bearish. So yeah, sure, it's very possible. Now, having said that, because this is May 16th, and by the time this happens, you are looking at least this week playing out, right? So what is next week? That's about 7 days forward, right? So we're looking at roughly 23rd or 24th of May, right? Somewhere here, about 7-8 days out. So at this point in time, it's possible that it gets retested and bounces back, assuming the EIP 1559 excitement continues, and then it starts getting closer to June. And that's the information that's not in the charts, but seems logical to me.
Great.
Okay, so
we've also been chatting a lot over the past months, kind of the serious alts or challenges to BTC and ETH that are, taking up a lot of mind share. Should we have a look at some of those and see how they're comparing? There's still lots of red candles all around, but do they have better resistance or fundamentals that we're seeing there, Shanky?
It's a great question. Don't know, right? So that's something that is kind of tricky. I think if you just look at the price charts though, and the price action over the last few days, there are two things that are evident, right? That is very clear. One is the fact that overall there is a lot of correlation between how ETH's price has been moving and how the price of BNB has been moving, right? So both have been pretty much in tandem for the most part, right? Now, obviously, they're not exactly 100% correlated, but they've been quite correlated. Although they are serious alts, it's the same crowd that is bullish in some sense about the broader sort of DeFi and, the faster chain and just that whole world of crypto that exists around DeFi, right? The DeFi networks and the DeFi ecosystem. So if you look at BNB, I think right now BNB definitely has seen some sharp correction. Even before today's drama, I think BNB was seeing a little bit of, call it horizontal movement in price. Of course, quite volatile though, but nonetheless horizontal movement in price within a certain band for almost a week, right? So if you looked at the BNB prices from 3rd of May to 12th of May, they were mostly range bound. I mean, the range is wide enough from, $698 to $598, almost $100 worth of movement. But it was within that range, right? So it was going up and down within that territory. And then now, lately, it has come down and it is retesting EMA 20, right? So what we have seen, actually it's EMA 50, pardon me, I had changed this. So I guess I read this also wrong. This is also EMA 50. Let me put an EMA 20 here. I think we made this change for Bitcoin. Yeah, we made it for Bitcoin. And I think we didn't realize we didn't set it back. So here you go. Okay, there you go. So yeah, so it breached 20, and it's retested 20s. Okay, fine. Yeah, but it could come back for sure. It could still come back down here because as we had seen previously, it has also tested EMA 50 a few times, right? The number that we were looking at was EMA 50. And plus, all the bearish momentum might break it down to the last sort of fib level. So going back to BNB, what we are seeing here is that it has certainly tested 50, EMA 50. And then my sense here is that it is going to remain bullish, but it could certainly also retest its previous areas of support, right? So the previous area of support, one of the areas of support was this 458 mark, right? Which is again closer to 0.382. I will not be surprised if this gets retested, so roughly around the 450, right? 458 mark. Is what one could expect with BNB. I think it's definitely headed in that direction before it bounces back, assuming everything else is also sort of, net positive at some point in time. If we move on to the couple of others, actually, let me go to Sol first. Solana has been an interesting player. Solana's seen a lot of action lately. Solana, interestingly, today is still going green when the rest of the world is going red. So I don't know what this really means. Now, what I can say is that Solana has found an area of resistance somewhere around here. It seems like it's finding difficulty to break that. Oh, okay, makes sense. The $50 mark, I think it's finding difficulty to break the $50 mark, but it has been staying above the $40 mark. So it's hovering in the 40 to 50 range, right? That's where Solana has been. And there was an attempt earlier today to break that, and it went all the way up to 52, but couldn't hold it, right? So which is why you see a long wick out there, and the price moved back in the zone. This one is the most difficult to predict. I actually cannot say anything from this chart. The only thing I can say from this chart is that this is very range bound between 40 and 50. And really nothing at this point in time is very clear why it should move either up or down, right? So I think we'll watch this for the next couple of days and see what happens.
Yeah, it's still in a phase of price discovery, following kind of the progressive rollouts and a wait and see, I'd say, from both developers and users and investors. So yeah, it could go either way. It's definitely hard to see a trend there.
Yeah, totally. And these are newer ones as well. So, they don't really have too much history, right, for us to teach us in terms of how the price moves. If you go to Roon, that's another one we had mentioned. This has also been seeing a lot of price action. See, again, these have gone up further.
Yep.
Roon is very promising just because of its story and cross-chain and all the good stuff. But it's too young. It's too early in its journey. It barely has its first set of apps which have gone live. I see that it is still a very strong trend as far as Roon goes, right? It's been tracking above EMA 20 for the most part. It's pulled back a little bit, but it has respected that. The overall price surge from late March to now has been extremely promising, right? And I think the pullback has come down all the way down to 0.236 of the fib. Yeah, I can expect it to hover around here. And if the prices keep remaining bearish, I wouldn't be surprised if it even comes down to this one. So like the $14, $15 level. It may not have to do anything with Roon per se, but I just feel like if the overall market starts turning a little bearish, ultimately it impacts everything else in the market. And so therefore it might just correct down to, firstly it's 0.236 Fibonacci, and then, to the next Fibonacci, which is the 0.382, which also in a sense coincides with some of its support levels, right? Because if you look at this, it has found support level here, a little below its 0.326. Yep. And then it has found another support level, which is a little below its 0.382. So yeah, it's quite likely that it'll go and retest those support levels. That seems very logical, but I think just like Sol, we need to let this play out a little bit. And this week is going to be interesting. I think as we keep an eye on the majors, it'll be interesting to see how these smaller young coins perform in this week of turmoil. And then last one, maybe we look at FTM with the Phantom coin,
yeah.
right? Phantom token.
So they seem to be hurt a lot more by, kind of the movement on Bitcoin and ETH than what we were seeing from, say, Solana or Roon.
That's true. At least the charts definitely say that. And also, in fact, it has seen a little bit of bearish movement last week as well, right? There have been humongous big red candles. I remember we covered this in a previous session, and in fact, one of the listeners had asked us a question in terms of where do we see the price action going. I think at that point in time, we were somewhere close to here, right? Because it had touched the 0.84, right? Which we had put as one of the areas of resistance, which was also close to its previous all-time high, right, at 0.87. And I think the question was, do we see it retesting it before it drops down? And I think our idea was, at least then we had predicted that it would go down once, touch the 0.236, and then probably take its march upwards. And it looks like that's exactly what happened. I think that session was roughly around 5th of May or so. It came down.
Yeah, it was 2nd of May. Yep.
Right. And it retested 0.326. It went back up. In fact, it did better than we had thought. breach. But looks like after that, the story has unfolded in a very different way. The definitely could not hold. What this tells me, what this really tells me, I think if I just purely look at this, is that there isn't enough buying pressure the moment it breaks this 0.842. And certainly at this 0.9 bucket, right, the moment it's breaching 0.9, at least for now, at least as it stands, there is definitely not enough buying support. And so it just lost steam. Everybody who had bought it up and taken the price up here just took profits perhaps, right? And it went all the way down twice and couldn't hold it. And then it seems like where it is right now, which is also below the 0.382 fib, is where the price seems to be okay. The price seems to be stable, which is between the EMA 20 and EMA 50. So yeah, it seems like that's its area. And if the market, sorry,
yeah, if I was kind of weaving in crypto Twitter analysis as well there, it does just seem that Phantom has been less hyped, right? It is still just trying to do what it's doing. Whereas, yeah, there's a lot more hype around kind of Roon, Solana, and even Cardano has seen a big spike up in the last few days just on a testnet launch, right? So when you have that engine of hype that's there waiting for some good news and some reason to pump the price, they tend to kind of follow through on that. And I think, yeah, Phantom's perhaps just got a different set of holders at the moment who are more engaged on the long-term vision and not any short-term kind of price action.
Actually, that's a fantastic summary there, Paul, because you're right. For example, Cardano, that I don't get that at all.
No.
It has been hyped even before it had its testnet. I mean, it was always hyped, right?
Yes.
The price action was ahead of the story for months now, right? So, and even now, nobody has clarity in terms of what exactly it would feel like and where would it go eventually, right? But price action has been positive for it forever, right? So that I don't get. I think certainly Solana has a lot more hype. It also has a lot more, call it institutional backing, especially with FTX and SBF sort of behind it. And that definitely has created a lot of momentum for that token, right? So certainly I think a lot of buying pressure is also coming from all the support and all the action in the Solana world. The other thing that has happened, I believe, is Solana is trying to play the BSC game. And so they went the IDO route with the Soul Starter and IDO and some stuff like that, right? Which right, BSC also did quite successfully with its cake and IDOs and other things. I think Solana is trying to play that game too. So it's possible that some of this momentum is because people are acquiring Soul tokens to go and buy IDO tokens, the classic sort of ICO IDO story, right? So I don't know whether it's a sustained growth, whether it's that short-term hype. It's tough to decipher that, especially in a very hype-driven market. The Roon FTM stories, though, I feel in at least the way we have been analyzing, you and I, has been, it's a little more balanced, right? Roon certainly has slightly more hype than Phantom, but I think both are interesting coins. I mean, both are building some new type of tech, and it's possible that eventually in the long run, it might gather more believers than these, short-term winners. But well, we'll let it unfold, right? We'll let it unfold and we'll learn from it.
Yeah, no, definitely lots to learn from. And yeah, that was a really good kind of run through of those kind of majors and yeah, some of the challengers or serious alts. And I think a lot of people are asking, typically in the broader market cycles, when we see at least Bitcoin going bearish, sometimes that means it's alt season and people start to reallocate into those other assets. But we're kind of in that midway point. It's not declared that bull market's over, and it's not really clear whether alt season started. So yeah, it's really tricky to say.
It's the Elon season, so we'll find out what's happening there.
Yeah, we're in that noisy season where any particular tweet in any direction can start to, people can build in behind that, and it's kind of a market craze.
Yeah. That's actually a I mean, anyway, that we've discussed it enough today, but the bottom line is that I think going too much behind these few influencers is always dangerous. That's the kind of key takeaway, and the market is sort of reacting to it, and we'll see where it stabilizes.
Perfect. Well, if you're a new listener or even a regular, make sure to follow us on Twitter at Going Elliptic, and also our newsletter, Going Elliptic, on Substack. As always, we do this and we do it live to get your feedback and hope that you can learn something. Do feel free to DM us or drop questions in the chat or comments below. And yeah, we're always happy to engage and to see what you guys would like to hear more of. So like, subscribe, and get in touch.
Absolutely. Yeah, everything here is just educational purposes, no investment advice. So just sort of clarifying that one more time. But yeah, do ask us questions. Even before the show, during the week, if you have any questions or any particular tokens that we should cover, or guests that we should have, chime in and let us know. We're here to provide good information, hopefully good, useful information. So we will take the advice seriously and we'll try and act on it.
Perfect. Well, yeah, thanks, Shanky. And hopefully all of the listeners have learned something more today. And yeah, there's lots of other videos there in our channel to check out as well. So we hope to hear from you and see you on a future show.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Paul, and thank you, listeners. And yeah, there'll be more coming. There's always more coming. So.
Great. All right. See you next time.
All right.